I'm all set. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. The 551st meeting of the Planning Board of the Village of Depew will come to order. We have a roll call, please.
Member Agnew.
Here.
Member Fedorovich.
Here.
Member Matuzek.
Here.
Member Moravsky.
Here.
And Chairman Wachowski.
Here. Could everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a technical difficulty. Give me one moment.
We have a technical difficulty. Just give us a second here.
Yeah. Yeah. Just move that up.
Thank you. Notification of emergency exits.
The emergency exits are located to my left and to the rear of the room. In an event of an alarm or emergency, please move in an orderly fashion to the exits and evacuate the building.
Thank you. We have two items on the agenda tonight. The first is for the property located at 3283 Walden Avenue, Unit 3291. Could we have the legal notice, please?
Please take notice that the Village of Depew Planning Board will hold a hearing on Thursday, January 5th, 2023 at 7 p.m., a pre-board meeting beginning at 6:30 p.m. in the conference room in the council chambers of the municipal building, 85 Manitow Street, Depew, New York, to consider the application for submission by Nicholas Edsel on behalf of City Limits Moto / Triumph Buffalo for the property located at 3283 Walden Avenue, unit number 3291, Depew, New York 14043. The following matters to be reviewed. They are requesting the following. Requesting a special use permit to operate a motorcycle dealership in an M1 zone as per chapter 260, subset 26027, under the guidelines of chapter 260, subset 26033K, and of chapter 260, subset 26033N. Any and all persons interested in such application will be heard at this time.
Okay, who is here representing the project? If you could come forward, state your name and your relationship to the project, please.
Sure. I am Nicholas Edsel. I'm the applicant. So I'm looking to move my existing business from Cheektowaga into this property at 3291 Walden. We just got the franchise agreement from Triumph to also bring them along for the ride. So we're looking to bring what's currently a small repair facility with clothing and accessories to this location with the 3,500 square foot showroom space to put brand new Triumph motorcycles for sale.
How many new bikes would you be having there for sale?
The showroom floor is set up for 22 bikes at a time. Obviously, we're also going to be able to do used units as part of trade-in program and stuff like that. So at any given time, there might be about 35 bikes on the showroom floor.
And your repairs will those always be to the rear of the building, rear
Correct.
of the property?
Yeah.
What about any kind of outside storage, used tires, anything? Would there be anything?
No, typically none of that stuff's stored outside. Motorcycle tires, we might do a dozen a week. We have internal storage for that and like a caged cart, and those get picked up once a week for recycling.
How much flammable liquids would you be storing there?
We keep one 5-gallon gas can and a anti-flammable cabinet for topping off bikes for test rides and things like that. If somebody brings something in with low fuel and we need to do some testing, we keep 5 gallons on site. The only other thing that we keep is, your aerosols, like your brake cleaner and stuff like that, but we have a giant 80-gallon flammable cabinet for all that as well.
Very good. And obviously noise, it's kind of an industrial area, but that would all be towards the rear of the property mostly?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Any questions from board members?
No, sir.
Okay, Sam, anything? Legal?
Nothing from me. We talked about noise concerns in the pre-board meeting, and it was mentioned just how industrial this area is, and
Right.
that shouldn't really be a problem with the loud locomotive that'll pass behind you a few times a day.
Should be 2 or 3 times the volume of anything we'd be doing, yeah.
That's a roundabout way of saying nothing from legal on this one.
Thank you. Code enforcement?
So as we discussed in the pre-board, the only thing that I didn't verify from you, which would be required, would be an oil separator from your repair area, your floor to, the outside. Probably already has one there, but
Right.
that's something we didn't discuss when we,
Yeah, I don't know how I would figure out record-wise if there is one there or not, because it's been, the other businesses that it has been was an MP Carroll Hardwood, then it was a boat dealer for a time, so I know they had boats in there and they did boat service and stuff like that, and then it was Empire Granite and Marble where they do giant industrial cutting of granite slabs and stuff like that, so I know that they had a drainage system put in. You could see the, where they had cut the concrete and put it in and backfilled it, so I'm just not familiar with anything on site as far as where I would look for a separator.
Is that something you can get in contact with the property owner? Maybe they've
So-
got something.
I know he's only owned it for a couple of years because I believe the original owner was MP Carroll Hardwood. And I've tried reaching out to people from MP Carroll to see if they have any like record drawings. And I asked the current owner if he has any record drawings, and he referred me to Depew. And I tried to do a record search here to see if I could find anything. I wasn't able to come up with anything. The only thing I have is the property survey from when it was purchased, which obviously doesn't have a ton of information on it other than like parking spaces, overall layout of the property and things like that.
So that's something you could work with code enforcement on making sure that that's
Yeah.
there, or if not, it'll have to be installed. But that's code enforcement, so. Engineering, Terry?
Well, just about the oil water separator, you said there's an existing floor drain in there right now?
There's some type of system there, yeah.
Okay, so typically there might be two spaces that you can pull one open, one of the grids or something like that for a clean out area. Either a filter or something would be down in there, you'd be able to access it pretty easily if there was one there.
Okay.
You would see it down there.
Okay.
So it sounds like, I suspect from what I'm hearing, it may not be there.
Okay.
You can install those, they can be smaller ones. From what you're doing, probably a small unit would suffice for that.
So it would be indoors, not outdoors?
You could do it indoors, yeah. There's a filtration system you can get, there's different types you can use and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I didn't know if it could, because I know there's a giant drainage grate by the loading dock. I didn't know if it might be in there.
It's possible. I'll come in.
loading dock does not require it by code, just so you understand. That's considered outside. Any floor drain inside,
Right.
used for automotive, would have to go through
Right.
oil separator and go into the sanitary sewer. It can't go into the storm sewer.
Correct, that's correct, yes.
Okay.
So Donnie, you could probably check that, or.
I'll work with him
you know,
on that
Look at
portion
that,
of it.
see what you find there, and if you need some help in looking at some kind of a system or something, we can help you out with that.
Appreciate that.
Yep.
Okay.
Anything else, sir?
No, that's it, that was my only concern, everything else looked good. Were you planning on putting bikes out front for display at all, or possibly nicer weather, just for a little bit there in the front there? Or-
So like the side of it that actually faces the street, is there's like a retention pond there and
Right.
quite a bit of green space. So the only place we might put something is like when you come into the parking lot, the entry doors are perpendicular to the road,
Yep.
and there's like a little cove on either side of the door that in
I see
nicer
it.
weather we might put a bike outside on either side of the door.
Okay, yep, okay, that's fine.
Are there any public concerns or comments? At this point, a motion would be in order.
I motion that we approve make a motion to recommend to the village board to accept the site plans as submitted with the condition that they verify the oil water separator.
Okay. And that would be also for the special use permit?
Yes.
Okay.
I second that motion.
On a motion by Member Agner, seconded by Member Matuzak, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Agner,
Yes.
Member Fedorovich,
Yes.
Member Morowski,
Yes.
Member Matuzak,
Yes.
and Chairman Maciejewski.
Yes, 5-4, motion's carried. Good luck.
Thank you.
If you want to pull them out and show everybody real quick, I know you're working on it.
Yeah.
know if I was gonna get ahead.
No scooters, right?
No scooter.
Motorcycles, makes a difference.
So some of them you guys might have in the.
Yes,
small
yeah,
package,
in your
a lot of
package,
sheets,
yep.
But, this first sheet is kind of how the layout's gonna be. This is our proposal from Triumph for what's going to be their area, so you can kind of see, there's 18, 20 bikes of the new Triumphs on their portion of the floor, which leaves us this remaining space to put used bikes and things like that. So that would be that. Of course, this is upside down. The rest of these are going to be upside down. Okay. So this is some of the fixtures on what's going to be in this space, which would be this fixture here, and this fixture here, and this fixture here, which has all kinds of display materials for the new bikes and things like that. This is the door opening. This is the kind of space I was talking about. We might put a bike here and a bike here when it's nice out. We're just going to put some signage above the soffit there and a Triumph logo on the side of the building here. There's going to be a similar sign on the front of the building facing the street in an existing box that's already left behind by Empire. We're waiting to get pricing and stuff back on that. This would be our new insert in the existing panel sign. This one currently says Empire Granite, so that's the sign standard. This is, you can kind of see the green space that's out front. It's got some buffalo statues and stuff like that. And then this would be kind of the service area. This is the back area that we were speaking of. There's a couple of floor drainage systems in here, which we were just talking about. This is kind of rendering of how that space is going to look. We're painting the floor with the anti-skid gray, painting the first 4 feet of the wall with an epoxy gray, and everything's going to be brand new and organized and all that kind of stuff.
Are you going to continue your sales like you do at your present store, like your clothing and accessories?
Yes. Yep. So there's there's a space in here that's kind of cut out. So this would be the showroom. This is the shop space. And there's about 1,800 square feet in like a U-shaped area in here that we're going to put all the clothing, helmets, gloves, shoes, armor, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I went on your website. I mean, your store looked pretty organized. So.
Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, we've been in business about 7 years, and we kind of outgrew the space that we're in, and we knew the next step to get into a bigger space was to back it with, a franchise for, profitability's sake and everything. So,
well, very good. Yeah. Thank you for choosing Depew to do that. All right. The football game's not starting yet. I usually turn that down. Sorry about that. Okay, our second item on the agenda is for the property located at 2251 George Urban. Could we have the legal notice, please?
Please take notice that the Village of Depew Planning Board will hold a hearing on Thursday, January 5th, 2023 at 7 p.m. A pre-board meeting begins at 6:30 p.m. in the conference room in the council chambers of the municipal building, 85 Manitow Street, Depew, New York. To consider the application for submission by Ari Goldberg of Barclay Damon LLC on behalf of JRT Sign Properties LLC for the property located at 2251 George Urban Boulevard, Depew, New York, 14043. The following matters to be reviewed. Concept plan approval to build a proposed 8-unit multifamily apartment building in the C2 Shopping Center District. Any and all persons interested in such application will be heard at this time.
Who is here representing the project? If you could come forward, state your name and your relationship to the project, please.
Is this really the 551st planning board meeting? Yes. I've been to 1% of all the planning board meetings. Okay. Good evening, members of the planning board. Ari Goldberg from the law firm of Barclay Damon for JRT Singh Properties. JRT Singh owns 2251 George Urban Boulevard here in the village. Property is 1 acre, zone C2, and it has an active commercial plaza in front half of the 1 acre property. The rear of the property is undeveloped, and the applicant, he's owned it for about 5 years, and he looks at that undeveloped property and he's thinking about how can I make this more active? And what he's considering is an 8-unit, 2-story multi-family development in the rear of that property. I initially had intended to give more details about the specific apartment proposal before you, but I think what I want to do is reframe the conversation to more about the concept of multifamily units on this property and in this area. Because the site is what it is. The site is static, it's not changing, and we have to work around that site, and we have to work around the infrastructure and the utilities that are there. but want to hear more comments about the concept of multifamily units in the area. So in the village of Depew, the only zoning district that permits multifamily development as a standalone development is the R2 zone, or the R3 zone. It's one of the residential zones. It is R2, okay. In C2, what is allowed is upper story dwelling units. So we do have some flexibility in that regard to possibly rework the proposal before you and bring it into compliance with the code and make it a permitted use. There's a lot of concern whenever something like this comes up about spot zoning. And spot zoning is often talked about because it's an important tool for municipalities like the village of Depew to ensure that they are complying with their comprehensive plan and complying with the structure of their zoning code. It's also one of the most misunderstood concepts in zoning. I know that recently NICOM gave a presentation. I know Wade Beltramo, and I know that his presentations are good and they're informative. But one thing that I heard in the workshop session that I think is getting lost is spot zoning is not just looking at your zoning map and saying R2 doesn't fit there because there aren't R2 properties around it. It's about compliance with the comprehensive plan and about also the geography. So if you look at the comp plan for the village, part of it wants to focus redevelopment into the village and ensure that the tax base of the village is strong and that the village can continue to prosper as it has for many years. That's in part what this development is about. It's taking a 1 acre property where there's only development in the front and maximizing it to ensure that it's utilized to its full potential. And we want to balance that, more intense use with what's behind us, which is residential. To that end as well, if you were to rezone it to R2, I don't think that would be spot zoning because you're bordering another residential zone. You're essentially taking permitted residential uses and you're extending that to a minor degree to our property. Of course, that's not on the table, but I'd like to continue the conversation about spot zoning because it is important to this development. What we're looking at now, and these are some of the more details, it's a 2-story, 27-foot tall, 8-unit building. Each unit will be on 1 floor, complete with 2 bedrooms, a living space, a kitchen, and then in between each unit, there is a shared storage space. It's about 1,000 feet per unit, 1,000 square feet per unit, and the rents are going to be around $1,300 per month. And it's a market rent, but what it also does is it ensures that the target market who's going to live in these apartments is not anyone who could be labeled incorrectly or not as a transient. This isn't student housing. This isn't the kind of housing that's going to invite parties or a ruckus or be disruptive. It's young professionals or people who are looking to downsize or young couples. In the back now, for 8 units, we do have room to park everyone, 16 spaces. There wouldn't be a concern about off-street parking or people looping around looking for a space. The exterior will be stone at the bottom and then a siding, and then as the roof line approaches, there'll be some cornice work as well. As we propose, the building is set back 27 feet from the rear yard. That's the residences on Mary Lou, and the parking lot 20 feet setback. None of those parking spaces are facing south, so that's in an effort to cut down on headlights. That's also one of the similar reasons that for now the building is oriented north-south to ensure that windows for the residences are not looking directly into anyone's backyard. Of course, that 27 feet distance also mitigates that concern. So I think with that, I'll just remind that for now, all that's being considered is the concept of this very preliminary design, as well as the concept of multifamily units in this area along this commercial road adjacent to residential houses. So welcome comments from the board and the public, and look forward to working with the village on this process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Governor. So, in the work session, and you were there, you heard some of the comments. One of the biggest was the 5-foot separation between the existing building and the proposed building. Obviously, that's a safety concern. Does not meet the code. Can you address that at all?
It'll be considered. part of the next step. I think part of it was to bifurcate the buildings at first. We can look into it. I am curious as to what code provision requires separation between the new buildings. Do you have the citation? Because if you see on our concept plan, there's a chart in the bottom right, and it says required on the left and provided on the right. Required says 0. So I don't know if our engineering team missed that applicable code provision. If so, I'd kick them and inform them of what it
I
is.
don't have that in front of me. I do believe that there is a separation required between residential and commercial property.
Okay.
Or buildings, I should say.
Yes.
I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but I will get back to you on that.
What's the minimum? Do you know?
I know on residential, the minimum was usually to a property line or adjacent building 5 feet. But again, I did not look that
Yeah.
up.
I wonder if they thought it, that's why they did 5 feet, because that's what is the property line. But if it's different between the buildings, we have flexibility on the site, even though, as I mentioned, the site is static, and we have flexibility in the design. So it's something we'll take into consideration.
Okay. And with that, you heard one of the questions was about emergency vehicle access also. If you opened up that 5 feet, that would make another lane for emergency vehicles also.
And it's all a give and take, because then that
Correct.
means we could be losing units, or we could be bringing the building to the south, and I think that's probably something we want to avoid.
Correct. Questions from board members?
Obviously, the dumpster location, as it sits on the plan, isn't going to work, because that's going to block one of the access paths on the side of the building.
On the left side of the building, the western side of the plant?
Correct.
Correct.
And and according to the pictures, there's actually 2 dumpsters there. And I don't know if that, just in order to coordinate them all in
Yeah.
maybe one area.
Whatever we do with the dumpster, the key will be to maximize its distance from the residences to the south, as well as the residences we're proposing. So I think
And enclosed.
it'll be enclosed.
Well, is one dumpster for the front building and one for the apartments in the back, or both in the back for?
As envisioned, there were separate dumpsters for each use, but depending on possible site changes, maybe we could find some efficiencies in that regard.
Because there was one dumpster that looked like it was for like paper cardboard.
Oh, okay. I think just because it was yellow. I think that might have just been the engineers having fun with the Photoshop or something.
Any other questions from the board members?
I guess I'm curious why you say that, because it's, you have a 25-foot setback that it's going to, and the building they won't have a problem seeing over the fence.
I think what I said was that the distance mitigates the ability for someone to just peer over. So the further you are away, the less ability you have to see out and down,
But it's also a 2-story building.
as are 2 of the houses on Mary Lou that we're adjacent to, who are conceivably looking into I'm not looking into people's backyards, but people do. But there's also, we could get creative. If you saw, there's a lot of green space on that south portion too. Be happy to add, to the extent reasonable and practical, more landscaping in the form of both evergreen or deciduous, maybe even a berm as it's appropriate. We want to be good neighbors, and that's what part of this process is too, is to feel that out, to hear the concerns of citizens and neighbors, and we'll work with them on doing what's right for everyone.
Also, too, they have a little note on here, they got like 27 feet to the building, and underneath it, it's 25 feet, which is the requirement.
Yes, we have 2 feet to play with.
And, no, you don't, because actually, it's 25 feet or the height of the building.
Which is 27 feet.
So it is
So we're
20,
max-
you are 20, I'm saying is you are
Yeah.
at 27 feet. There is no room to move that.
And something we'll have to consider because, as mentioned, the chairman mentioned it also, the 5 feet is incorrect as well. And if need be, you have another board in this town, in the zoning board, and if it comes to it, then we'll have to talk to them.
Okay.
And I know this is just a concept, but again,
Yeah.
one of the things we have to really take in consideration is the residential property on Mary Lou, what kind of lighting for the parking lot and the building would you be looking at?
I don't know if it's been discussed thoroughly, but in terms of environmental impact, I think that the trend now is dark sky compliant lighting.
Which
So
is required.
It's required. And then I think there's no patios, so there wouldn't be anything like can lights in the patios that would be on at the residents' choosing. It would probably be security lighting and dark sky compliant lighting.
Okay.
But it can also be strategically placed so that nothing is shifting south. It would only be towards the parking lot. Yeah, you can see on the concept plan, there's no light poles shown yet or
Right.
anything like that.
Right.
One of the other things that was brought up too, that we mentioned was, if there's children in this area, this is, next to commercial properties, we might want a fence not only along the back, but also on the west and east sides.
I did hear that. That's noted and taken into consideration. Do you know what's the minimum fence height for commercial between?
Commercial, I believe, is 8 foot, but it might be 6 foot. I got to
Okay.
look into it, but I'm pretty sure it's 8 foot for commercial.
Yeah, and in other projects in the past, we've sought area variances for fence height with that in mind, that there's a good blend of security and privacy to do a fence that actually your code says is too tall. Because that's something, there's a good argument under the village law criteria for that variance, and if it's a bridge we need to cross, I'd be happy to go across that bridge.
Any other questions from the board members?
Any possibility of connecting two buildings, alleviating that 5-foot space, and even going up on the front building?
Yeah,
Possibly?
Yeah, so the owner, he's owned it for 5 years, but at first we had considered that, and we were unaware exactly of the initial building specs and the engineering, other than owning it and operating it. One thing that I'm going to engage another conversation with the code enforcement officer is looking into, if there was an initial site plan approval for this, whenever it was built, are there initial engineering drawings, and can we then determine the strength of the foundation and whether we can go up? And if we can, I think it's something we're going to explore in earnest based on some of the comments that have been made, and your code.
Any other comments from board members?
Just to reiterate, you did discuss fire safety there with the 5-inch hose. I
Correct.
don't know if you wanted to discuss that right now.
Yeah, we discussed, you were there, the first truck in, if it lays in that 5-inch
Yep.
hose right now, we're probably not gonna get another truck back there. Kind of cuts everything off. That's what I'm saying, even at 5 foot.
Can you educate me on how that works? Because that's something especially in the village of Depew, I want to know.
So the
Exactly how that
fire
goes.
department runs with 5-inch supply hose. And once that's laid, you do not move it. It's pretty much a water line above ground.
Got it.
And it takes up a lot of room. So if there was a fire in that building and laid across that driveway into the back, the access road to that apartment complex, we're probably not gonna get another truck back there.
Hindering the ability to fight any fire that
Correct.
might be there. Okay.
Correct. Especially trying to get the ladder truck back there if a rescue needed to be done.
Yeah.
So. Any other questions from the board members? Legal, Sam?
So, believe it or not, I have something today. Mr. Goldberg, when you made your comment about not thinking there's any 5-foot rule or anything like that, I started looking into it, and I landed on 26025, which governs C1 commercial. We're in a C1 on this, right?
Yes.
And I have some real concerns about the setback requirements of a budding residential to a commercial building, which this would technically be. Have you looked at that at all?
No. There is quite a bit of a quirk in the code, though, that you could put residential and commercial on top of each other. But if they're separate buildings, they need to be 20 feet apart.
Right, well, I'm looking at 25 feet, which
Okay.
this would not be, right?
I thought we were in C2.
Are we in
Isn't that what we
C1 or
established?
C2?
I believe it's C2.
C2.
It's C2.
It might be the same, though.
Yeah, probably the same.
This is why I don't talk. No, just kidding. No, it is the same in C2. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
So it's 25 feet between buildings of distinct use.
So it's
residential.
25 feet or the height of the building, whichever is greater, for an abutting residential in the rear yard. If I'm
So what they're talking about there isn't between the building and the building in the front. They're talking about the separation of the
Yeah.
building from the actual back property line in that case.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which we are in compliance
Which you
with,
are in compliance
as Mr.
with.
Agner said.
Uh,
Barely. Well, I take the village at its word. The engineer said it in the workshop as well, and I'll work with Don.
Yeah, look into it. I was just kind of cursorily taking a look, but I think there is a rule at 5 feet, might be violating it.
Thank you, Mr. Alba.
Anything else there?
No, nothing for me.
Code enforcement?
I think we've covered everything. Everything else we could discuss, you know, in the office.
Excellent.
Okay. Engineering, Terry?
One thing also is, for the code for the, and I'll be citing, 26031E5, the parking, the driveway area there, from the face of the structure, the new structure there, should be 25 foot required. And right now you've got 20.25 to the pavement. So that needs to be bumped that way a little bit. You do have room on that east property there. You can push that green space a little bit more out.
So it's
Make that up.
edge of blacktop to building face?
Yes, 25 feet. And you've got 20.25 there.
Is there any landscaping requirement within there?
Within that 10-foot, the landscaping setback you've got, that's correct.
Okay.
But you can make up that, push that in, you'll still have your landscaping requirement there.
Okay.
And there also is, for recreation space, for apartment units, since you have 8 units, 400 square feet per unit. I did a quick calc on that. It looks like you didn't meet that there between the west side and then the south side. You've got enough green space to fulfill that there too, the way it sets.
Is there any sense of, in that 25-foot setback, is green space preferred? Is a wider sidewalk preferred? I don't think the code makes any requirement.
More green space is always better.
Okay.
You know? Yeah.
And that would possibly also even increase the open space for
Correct.
each unit, yeah.
Anything else, Terry?
And just the fire access situation, that's kind of a big stickler there, as we talked about already on that. You've heard some of our comments about that, getting around the building and things like that. But other than that, it looks okay on this part. And the fence is a big thing for kids and stuff like that. You've got commercial, you've got an auto place on on the east side there, open bay doors. You don't want kids going over to those open parking lots and things.
Yeah, it's interesting too. If you look at I think you shared an aerial earlier, and this is the only site on that strip of George Urban that the back is not developed.
Right.
You know, Consumers has their loading bay and everything,
Yeah.
and this one does not. So I think that's probably part of the impetus to, you look at your neighbors and what they've got, maybe you want a little bit what they have too. But in any event, appreciate all the comments. I think there's a lot for us to digest and look forward to hearing what the neighbors have to say too.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing is mailbox access. Is it going to be external, internal? How do the mailboxes work back here? I don't want them by the street or further towards the front of that commercial building there for people walking up that way with a parking lot there and that. I didn't know how you possibly would use that.
Well, best practices.
Okay.
So I just did notice something here that I'd like to bring up. On the side of the existing one-story building, you've got the new dumpster location. If that's 20 foot there, would that serve as a secondary fire access road if that dumpster wasn't there?
Yeah,
Would probably make more sense not to have that there and to relocate that, so that if you did block that front with the 5-inch line, you could still bring equipment in on that side to
Correct.
fight on the back side of the property.
Okay, just taking notes there. That's noted. Thank you.
is there anything else you wanted to present before
No,
we
I'll
open to public comment?
I'll shut up.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we'll open up the public concerns and comments. I know there's a lot of people here. Please come forward one at a time, state your name for the record, and address the board with your concerns.
Bear with me. My name is Bonnie Ziliaks. I'm here with my husband, Paul.
Can you spell your last name for me, please?
Z as in zebra, Illiox. Now, I know the owners of 2251 George Urban Boulevard, JRT Singe Properties LLC, have not upheld the standards of our community. They do not maintain their property, grass, fencing, exterior building. Ultimately, they are decreasing the value of our neighborhood. Neighbors are responsible for maintaining our properties. Therefore, the plaza should be held responsible and accountable for their neglect. If they don't, they should be fined and consequences requiring them to do so. 56 years ago, my husband Paul and I moved into our home at 38 Mary Lou Lane, Depew, New York. We are one of the 2 stories that they talked about. At that time, there was an empty lot behind our property on George Urban Boulevard. The property levels were exactly the same, and we never had flooding problems on our properties. After the plaza was built and an addition was put on, all the dirt excavated for the buildings was put behind the building up to our property line. The level of the fill in some places is 4 feet higher than our property. There was never any proper drainage installed. Every time it rains or there is a snow melt, our property and all adjacent properties to the plaza flood. The fence at the property line is in deplorable condition and falling over. My husband Paul has personally had to reattach the panels himself, as the property owners of the plaza have no regard for the homeowners adjacent to this property. The fence is a catch for all types of junk and trash. The back of the plaza itself has paint peeling off the cinder block, and unknown junk is often piled up and leaning on the building. We have seen some type of rodents running along the fence and in our yard. There has never been any maintenance to the property except lawn cutting from time to time. They don't do it on a regular basis. We don't believe any of this will change if a new building is built. That's why we strongly oppose the construction of any apartment building at this site.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Ziliak. Also, with some of those concerns you brought forward, please notify the building department about what those are.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Is there anyone else? Please come forward.
Is it going to be for a new issue or for?
As long as it's on the subject property we're talking about.
I'll wait.
Well, that's the only thing that there's public comment on, is the 2 projects on the agenda tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was under the impression that I could bring up recycling and tote for the.
That's during a board meeting. This is the plan.
Regular village board.
Our
This is
next
planning
meeting is
board.
on January 17th, and we'd welcome your comments then.
January 9th,
January 9th?
Sorry
Yep.
about that.
on Monday.
Oh, that's right, because the 17th is the holiday.
Ah, all right.
16th.
Again, please, for the record,
Yes, on Monday.
state your name, please.
Priscilla Richardson, and I live at 46 Mary Lou Lane. I'm the second 2-story house, and needless to say, yeah, the fence does get taken, broken. I've had to report it a number of times and finally got it fixed because I have a chain link there, and I don't want my backyard exposed to George Urban. Needless to say, I have to take care of me, and I do have flooding in my backyard, and I have seen rodents, and even my friend 2 houses down from me opened her grill and had a rat looking at her. That was very attractive. Yeah, and now she won't use the grill, and it's ridiculous. I'm afraid of the rodents, and I have 2 little dogs, and needless to say, I am afraid that if you have all that people living there and trash and the pizzeria and everything else, we're going to have more rats, and I really don't want rats. And I don't want water because eventually it'll come into my house, and needless to say, I don't need that. So I oppose it simply because, and I don't want people looking in my house. I'm 2 stories up, and if they're 2 stories up high, and I don't want to keep my shades drawn all the time. I really like my light. A little old lady, I need light. So I'm opposed to it for that reason. And I want the fence fixed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Erica Colas. I live at 11 Mary Lou Lane. I just bought my house 30 days ago. I would not have, knowing that this property was going in. We looked at a house a couple months ago, had a big complex. It had at least, I would say, a ½ acre between the backyard and the complex. And a lady was sitting on her porch, could see us, we could see her. So that whole thing, I don't know, 25 feet, I feel bad for those people that would have to deal with that. This community is mostly owned homes. Bringing in this property is going to decrease the value of the home that I just bought. I really don't want it. I don't want it. I don't think I would have moved into the area knowing that this was going to happen. So I agree with all of these people, and it's not even in my backyard. I'm on the opposite side. But it's a community of mostly owned homes. On the opposite side, you have a lot of renters. I wouldn't buy on that side because of that purpose. So what is that going to mean for people that are coming into the community? Are they going to buy houses if they have this? I don't know.
Could you just spell your last name for the
Yes.
record, please?
Kolacz.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, my name is Norm Flipiak. I'm at 82 Mary Lou.
Can you spell your last name for me, please?
Filipiak. And my concern is of having people that close. And from what I've heard and the questions, it seems like the project is too big to fit in the area they have. That's why they seem to have all these concerns. And especially with the concerns of the 25 feet. 25 feet isn't much. Probably from these 2 walls. I mean, that's close. I mean, you're talking, looking at people's backyards, an 8-foot fence doesn't do any good when you're 27 feet in the air. And I'm just concerned about the space requirements seem to be too small for the size of the building. Concerned about the dumpsters and that. Well, usually you need a cardboard dumpster and a garbage dumpster. With the other project, that's 4 dumpsters, not 2. Where are you going to put all this? There's no room for it now. You're talking about not even be able to get a fire truck back there? This just... And it's also a concern about, we don't have in our neighborhood apartments, so to speak. And when you do, a lot of times it does bring the property values down. And that's a concern for me. That's a big concern, property values. We have a kind of an isolated area where we're at. We're not really open to Dick Road to that because it's just such a short street with very limited access. So I don't know if we have room to do anything like that, and that's why I'm opposed to this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Flipiak. And my concern is this gentleman talked about nice vegetation and fixing things up nice for everybody. From experience, we have learned that we have rose gardens in our backyard destroyed by salt water and filth from snow melt. And although he talks about fixing things up really nice, most gardens don't take salt water, and we have had a lot of destruction from that. Bushes, roses, everything destroyed, salt water, and that's our experience. Can't have anything nice in the backyard.
Anyone else?
Audrey Hermanick, 87 Mary Lou Lane. Back in 1964, I was the first resident in that whole area on Mary Lou. So I guess I'm like the matriarch of that whole area, if that's what you would say. Very proud, at that time was Victoria Estates, little education of the area. And it was all ranch homes, 3-bedroom ranch. And then we did have some 2-story homes that moved in the area, which there was no opposition to. But to have an apartment house in a small space that is stuck in between a plaza and a backyard of our neighbors just doesn't seem feasible. It just doesn't seem right. What about the sheet draining from all this property? Is that going to go into their yards? You know, nobody has addressed the sheet draining, different things like that. Yes, I realize that there would be lighting on this building, but right now we as residents, we have C2 property on George Urban. We deal with the gas station Monroe Muffler. When they have their spotlights on in the front of their building, it lights up my dining room. But, so it will affect the residents, no matter what we say. You know, I just wanted to say that I am opposed against it. Not as a village board member, but as a resident on 87 Mary Lou.
Thank you, Audrey. Anyone else?
Marilyn May, 55 Mary Lou Lane. I just basically don't want to look out my window and see a high-rise. That's pretty much, I live on the opposite side. It is a residential area. Why do we have to look at an apartment building? And just from listening to these other people, I don't think that's very feasible for our area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, at this time, a motion would be in order.
I make a motion, excuse me, make a motion to the village board to table the project until they can bring in a new
Concept.
submittal.
Unfortunately, I think that request needs to come from the applicant. The only thing properly before this board right now is accept or deny the site plan. But, I'm sorry, the concept of the site plan. Long day. However, you can choose to adjourn this meeting and reopen it, but I think it's the same consideration.
When you approve or deny the concept plan, if we were to come up with a revised concept plan, would it be a new application or?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
And there's a waiting period, I believe, also, if I remember correctly. I have to get back to on it, but I do believe when it's denied that there's a time period you have to wait before you can reapply.
I'm not sure about that, but you could certainly ask us to.
I guess with some of those ambiguities, I'd request an adjournment. It sounds like we have a lot to consider. And if need be, we'll formally withdraw without a vote if necessary, but I think an adjournment is appropriate.
And that's essentially what we do when we motion to table.
Good.
So, the motion stands.
But I think you've obviously heard the comments of the neighbors. I think that has to be strongly taken into account.
Of course, and development is not about presenting a plan, pushing it in your face, and getting it approved. Development in New York is a collaborative process, and this is the first step in that collaborative process. I know from experience that this planning board and other members of the village board, as well as your zoning board, understands that collaborative process. We understand it too. We're a part of it, and appreciate all the comments that were made from both the board and the members of the public, and we do have a lot to consider.
We've got to finish the voting on the motion.
Okay. Motion by Member Egner to table, second.
Member Morowski, seconds.
Seconded by Member Borowski. Roll call vote, please.
Member Agnew.
Yes.
Member Fedorovich. Member Morawski.
Yes.
Member Matusek.
Yes.
And Chairman Maciejewski.
Yes, 5-4, the motion is carried to table. Before we adjourn, I want to thank all the residents from Mary Lou for coming and expressing your concerns. Hopefully, we can come to some form of agreement with this. So thank you. At this time, a motion is in order to adjourn.
All right, I can make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion by Member Igner, seconded by Member Fedorovich. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Meeting is adjourned at 7:53 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Is there really a football game tonight?
There's no football game tonight.
It's
bumped to Saturday.
I missed the last.
You would.
Oh,
no.
I know.
I'm Don Bielefeld, I'm the building inspector. Okay, very nice to meet you, Paul.
I'm not sure what the waiting period is. I haven't looked.
I can't remember what it is.